So welcome everybody. Welcome back after our winter break. We are going back and immersing ourselves in the book of Kohelet, a very deep book that really touches on the big questions about life, and it's somehow feels quite fitting to our times with the virus surging again, with Omicron, with the last few weeks, and our hopes that the new year will finally see the end of this pandemic. And we're right in the middle of chapter 4. And Kohelet's been a good companion for us so far, and has been an interesting place for us to talk and discuss. So let's, we started reading the beginning of chapter 4 last time, 3 weeks ago. And the first few verses of chapter 4, some of the are quite depressing. We're going to reread them, but we're not going to go back to talk about them. And, you know, Kohelet does have those moments where he comes across as quite depressed, you know, or cynical. But he has other moments where he uses, to some degree, he uses that part of his life to teach a lesson about, well, what is it that we're really doing here? And that's actually a useful way to use, I think, that feeling maybe, you know, and to really kind of go deeper and try and get to a place where you get to what is solid and what is powerful or what gives you meaning. And the more you do that, the stronger you are. So we don't have to dwell back on those first few verses, but we will also reread them. So we're going to share my screen. Let's see, first I have to pull it up here on my computer, chapter 4. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So Alan, please go ahead, start us off. We're going to read all of chapter 4.
I further observed all the oppression that goes on under the sun, the tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and the power of their oppressors with none to comfort them. Then I accounted those who died long since, when we start that one again. Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living, and happier than either are those who have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun. I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise come from men's envy of each other, another futility in pursuit of wind. True, the fool folds his hands together and has to eat his own flesh. But no less truly, better is a handful of gratification than 2 fistfuls of labor, which is pursuit of wind. And I have noted this further futility under the sun, the case of the man who is alone with no companion, who has neither son nor brother, yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? That too is a futility and an unhappy business. 2 are better off than 1, in that they have greater benefit from their earnings. For should they fall, one can raise the other, but woe betide him who is alone and falls with no companion to raise him. Further, when 2 lie together, they are warm. But how can he who is alone get warm? Also, if one attacks, 2 can stand up to him. A threefold cord is not readily broken. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king, who no longer has the sense to heed warnings. For the former can emerge from a dungeon to become king, while the latter, even if born to kingship, can become a pauper. However, I reflected about all the living who walk under the sun, with that youthful successor who steps into his place. Unnumbered are the multitudes of all those who preceded them, and later generations will not acclaim him either, for that too is futile and pursuit of wind. But not overeager to go to the house of God, more acceptable is obedience than the offering of fools, for they know nothing but to do wrong.
Well, that's a little better.
Right? It starts in quite a depressing place, but
Yeah, but it picks up, but I mean, things that it says are true today.
yeah, and it talks it talks about what we had felt had been missing this whole time, which is talking about companionship and relationships as the one of the places we find fulfillment in life, and speaks about it in quite a moving way. So let's go back. We did the first 3 verses last time. And maybe we touched on verse 4, I can't remember, but we're going to start there, unless someone has an overall comment on all that we read on this chapter. Okay. So I have verse 4, I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise comes from men's envy of each other or jealousy of each other, another futility in pursuit of wind. It's kind of like the basis of capitalism or consumerism.
But it's ignoring the fact that people have to farm, I mean, grow their own food. Not everybody, I guess, lived off of the labor of others. Maybe as king he did, but people had their plots of land and they raised their crops, their animals.
Mm-hmm.
What about people who do things because they love what they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way I'm reading this is that there is not every single labor or skillful enterprise. Maybe you can say that all labor and skillful enterprise that comes from men's envy of each other is futility in pursuit of wind. That's the way one that adds that little change, shifts it and say, well, not every single act of labor comes from envy of another person or jealousy of another person, but when your labor is motivated by that, to keep up with the Joneses, to have the most wealth, to be the most skilled at what you do, when it comes from ego, then that makes this big area of your life futility in pursuit of wind.
I think, sort of looking at it again, it wouldn't come across anywhere near as powerful if you said, I have also noted that most labor and skilled enterprise, if you would have qualified it in some way.
Yeah.
Not quite the same.
It's yeah. Well, it's very cynical, but it's also, you look at the world, around you. Maybe, sociologists will tell you, that we're as social animals, right? Where everything we do is to gain standing within the social group, right? And so, on some level, it's a comment on that, perhaps. We can move forward. Don't want to spend too much time on these first few verses. So here we get to the second verse. True, the fool folds his hands together and has to eat his own flesh, but no less truly better is a handful of gratification than 2 fistfuls of labor, which is pursuit of wind. What does that mean to you?
What does it mean he has to eat his own flesh? It doesn't mean literally that. It's
Well, he's hungry. You're if you the fool is the one here, right? The way they're interpreting it here and the way it's usually interpreted, someone who's chovek is also from chibuk, right? Whenever Claudine tells the little kids in the preschool, she says chibuk, chibuk, hug. So the person who hugs his hands, i.e., does not work. So you have to eat your own flesh because you're not working. If you don't work and you don't take care of yourself, then at some point you pay the price. If you don't put money aside for your retirement and or there are things in your life that you don't do, then you pay a price. But on the other hand, if you can, if you have two fistfuls of labor, but that labor is just pursuit of wind, you might as well instead spend your time one handful of gratification is better than working if that work is pursuit of wind. Does that strike true for everyone?
I just think it's said so. The words are difficult.
The words are a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you maybe would translate say the fool who doesn't work to feed himself has to eat his own flesh, but no less truly, better to gratify yourself a little, spend your life gratifying yourself than working really hard in something you don't enjoy. This is where my mind is at as a father, right? But we have this this book called The Ant and the Grasshopper, and the ant spends its whole life finding food and counting the food and making sure that all the food is well stored. And in this whole book, the ant is counting, has 300 pieces of corn and 200 pieces of cheese, and the grasshopper is just outside playing the violin. And the ant tells the grasshopper, you foolish grasshopper, when the winter comes, you're going to have nothing. And the grasshopper says, well, why don't you come and sing with me? You're just spending your whole day counting. Eventually the winter comes and the ant is in good stead because the ant has, all the food he needs. But the ant realizes, what, I don't know how to sing. I don't know how to have fun. And at a certain point, he opens the door and he finds the grasshopper there, half frozen to death, and tells the grasshopper to come in into the house. And he exchanges food, and the grasshopper teaches them how to sing, and that way they're not alone, and they get through the winter together.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. I thought you were going to say that the grasshopper ate the ant. That would not be in a kid's book, right?
That wouldn't be in the kids' book. Or
That would be awful.
that'd be in the old kids' books. Yeah.
That's a nice story.
But it's a nice story. Actually, it applies to this whole chapter of Kohelet quite well.
Yeah.
But it's finding that balance in life between not making the work the center of things and having time to enjoy yourself. And if you're spending your whole life working on something that's empty, that's not worth anything. And maybe that's what people are going through also in this period, right, with the pandemic, and the rates of people quitting their jobs is so high because people also don't want to spend their lives working at things that are two fistfuls of labor, but the pursuit of wind. And people would rather get one handful of gratification and then two fistfuls of labor, that's pursuit of wind. And so that's a positive thing perhaps of this period, though it's not causing a lot of trouble for small businesses. We continue. And I've noted this further futility under the sun. the case of the man who is alone with no companion, who has neither son nor brother, yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? That too is a futility and an unhappy business. What do you think of that?
A few weeks ago, one of the people who was participating, I won't mention any names, but who was participating in a class, not this one, talked exactly about this, about the fear of living alone, and not having anyone.
Yeah. Well, this whole pandemic has really brought that.
Yeah, right. It's frightening people.
He seems to take for granted that things that are not eternal are useless. And that's something we should question. Is that really the case? That things that are not eternal, that don't last from generation to generation, are useless, are sort of a pursuit of wind. That's something that seems to be embedded in his thought that he takes for granted. And I don't know if he's thought it through or not.
Well,
Yeah, and I would add that his whole concept of labor, I think most people in the world work to feed their children. And it's not futile, but it's not in and of itself uplifting, but their life is still uplifting if they can provide for a family. And he seems to have no concept of that either.
Well, the family part he seems to have some concept of in this chapter, but he's also someone who's had everything from the moment he was born.
Yeah.
So but I think it's really interesting to bring that point up of that supposition that only things which are eternal are of value, which may feel true in an ultimate point of view, but it's still nice for us to have all those things are not eternal. They can bring contentment. I just bought a new coat, which I really like, and that brings me some contentment. I know it's not gonna connect me to what is eternal, but it is true that if I was in a moment of extreme existential,
But you'll be warm. So that has value.
Well, in certain traditions, the gods envy the men because the men are not eternal, because the men have a life that's transient, because they have experiences. So,
right.
and what Kohalas is saying is any experience. I mean, essentially everything that is an experience, except maybe he allows something to sneak in that's called a little bit of joy. Simcha is useless. So he does seem to claim that simcha is not useless, but everything that counts as any kind of human experience, he feels is a waste of time. And I think, I don't know what perspective he's having about this. And I'm not sure if that's that doesn't seem to be part of the Jewish tradition. It's more like a Greek tradition than a Jewish tradition.
Oh, there I am. Sorry. I guess that was my internet. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It kind of, for some reason, I'm thinking of Elon Musk in this reference.
Uh-huh.
Here's a guy who says he only has a $50,000 house, yet he's a trillionaire, or a billionaire anyway. And it seems that his goal is to amass wealth and power. I don't know if he has a family or not. I don't think he does.
No,
But for some reason, it's making me think of him as this example. I don't know.
Well, it's Scrooge, isn't it? This
Sort
is-
of, yeah.
Yeah, this is and
Word. Yeah.
it's it's the worst part of the disease of the sickness of money. Money doesn't always do that to people, but it can do that to people, I think. Amassing money and all those, like Elon. I'm not sure if Elon Musk qualifies fully in the sense that I'm thinking of, like those famous recluses who they amass wealth and then they don't want to spend even a little bit because they hold on to it and they have no interaction with the world, and they don't want to give it even to their children or to charity, and it becomes stuck.
Howard Hughes.
Yeah, Howard Hughes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, there's a saying in I'm not sure which tradition this is, but that the money has to keep flowing. You have to keep flowing. Money comes in, you have to keep it flowing out. Keep giving and keep helping. And when money becomes stale, that's when it causes problems. When you just keep trying to amass it and that's all you care about, then it becomes stale. It doesn't stop moving, and then it starts to create problems. And he's saying, right? What's the use of all of that amassing of wealth if you don't have anybody to share it with, right? If you don't have someone to share your life with, you don't have somebody to give stuff to, right? What's the point of having all that wealth if you can't spend it and buy presents for the people you love and help people? And it's life is not only about sitting on your own wealth. And I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, these are very, in some ways, extreme situations. Most of us don't have that kind of wealth to sit on, but it is interesting comparing to someone like this to see the little places in our lives where we may have a little little places of that tendency.
Oh,
The rabbi has disappeared.
he disappeared.
Where'd he go?
And so did the text. He took the text.
Ah,
Where do you go when you disappear from something like? There must be
class,
something
the day the rabbi disappeared.
Yeah, if you've disappeared from a Zoom call,
You're finished.
what is the moral significance of that?
Maybe he didn't like something someone said.
He mentioned before that his internet connection was a little.
Yeah, and he
No.
had been freezing too. I don't know if you all noticed, but he had been frozen for about 3 minutes, his image.
Right, right. When I said something about at least your coat will keep you warm, that was when he just totally was frozen.
So it
You
looked like
put a
the
spell
process
on
of
him.
disappearance is the preamble to that is being frozen. And then what happens after a period of time is you disappear. I think we've discovered something about the mechanism of our lives through the internet.
First we freeze and then we disappear.
Right.
Disney made a great movie, Frozen. I'm surprised
Oh, right.
nobody's come up with the satire of being frozen on Zoom and made at least a short out of it.
There you go. You can be the one.
No, I'm not talented enough. I'll sell the idea.
You've gone to virtual reality. I have a client who's writing a book about that. It's scary.
It's the Matrix for that virtual.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
I won't go see that movie, thank you.
you don't have to go anywhere. It's on TV quite often.
And it's not that good.
No.
Okay, then I won't waste my time for sure.
No, the first one was good and the others were not.
Ah, the rabbi has returned. Where were you? Into what reality had you gone?
I disappeared into a deep contemplation, but
Did you find the answer?
I just realized I was all alone.
Oh, very good pun.
Okay, here we are. So let's let's go back,
Okay.
turn the video back on. Let's see, actually, stop this, see if I can. Okay, video is back to recording. Perfect. Okay, so I'm not sure how much you heard. We all were talking, but two are better off than one, that they have greater benefit from their earnings or their labor. For should they fall, one can raise the other, but woe betide him who is alone and falls with no companion to raise them. Well, Kohelet is really, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, Kohelet is not big on love of money, and he doesn't, as we were talking before, he's not. He thinks that money causes a lot of trouble, but human companionship, is something that really brings meaning to life in this world. And even from a point of view of deriving benefit from earnings, and also just helping each other, supporting each other. Money pits people against each other. We've all seen those families where money causes trouble between people, and that all the troubles and sicknesses that come from that. But on the other hand, if you have a relationship of partnership and love with another person, then one falls, it can open the heart of the other, and they help them up, and there's something really powerful and beautiful about that. And sometimes it's a spouse, but it could also be a really good friend, or it could be a partner, a sibling, or someone else.
He's saying this, or I think emphasizing that the other person, your partner, should be, or ideally would be, a friend, a family member, a spouse, not a member of your court.
Yes,
or somebody that you're paying. And
that's true.
let's see, line 11 struck me, because, and I'm trying to remember my stories, but it was David. Was it David? When he got old,
Sure.
he was cold, and they brought a young woman to lie with him.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's kind of saying, no, that's not the kind of warmth you want to have. You want to have warmth from someone who really, that you have a real relationship with.
Beautiful. I think I thought of that story too when I read this, and really well put, because verse 10, and it says, when one falls, he shall, who will bring him up? His chaver, right? His friend. It says, and friendship, or is something that our tradition talks about a lot. Just like Maimonides has 8 different levels of charity, Maimonides also has different levels of friendship, and that friendship can be with a spouse, it can be with a friend, it can be with a student or a teacher, it can be with a parent, a sibling, and he talks about those different levels of friendship. And Maimonides talks about how, the first level is just a friendship of circumstances. You're in a certain place, a certain time, you have something to do together. But then the second level of friendship, I believe there are 3. The second level of friendship is a friendship that transcends circumstances, and where you help each other and raise each other up. And then the third level is a spiritual, where you're both on the similar, you're sharing a purpose in the world, and that's the third level of partnership and of friendship. You share a purpose, a sense of purpose, and a spiritual mission in the world, and that's the highest level. But what strikes me here too is, this is a concept that's familiar to us from the Torah, because what is it? What's your obligation if you see your fellow's ox by the side of the road? You have to raise your fellow's ox from the side of the road. It's the same language here, and I mean, Kohelet is actually pretty pragmatic. He's not a very romantic guy. He doesn't say, you should have a spouse so that your spouse can, you can share the beauty of love together. He's not talking high up in the clouds. He's saying, it's nice to have somebody there who can pick you up when you fall down. He's saying it's nice to have someone who can keep your bed warm. It's nice to have someone who can keep you warm spiritually and emotionally when life is tough. It's a very real sense of the power of companionship. And he's been talking for so long about all the things that can go wrong and all the things that you go through in life. So when you go through things in life, right? The last chapter was there's a season for everything. When you go through the season for crying and the season for mourning, and when you go through the season for destroying and for tearing apart, it's nice to have somebody with you who can help you a little bit through it, right? Who can pick you up, and vice versa. And that's just a very kind of tachless view of companionship and life in this world. I don't know, what do you think?
I'm surprised actually to see this here, because for 3.5 chapters, he has not talked about companions or family or love at all. And this is the first mention that he has made in 3.5 chapters of somebody besides himself. So now I'm seeing this relationship that seemed very I thou in a Martin Buber sort of way. Now it's gone in another direction. So I'm alerted that it's gone in another direction. I'm not quite sure how it fits in terms of everything that's come before. I mean, I'm still trying to put it in the context of what has come before. It surprises me because I didn't expect this turn. So did he have to go through all of that other internal analysis or whatever it is we want to call it in order to arrive here? I'm not sure yet. That's what I'm thinking.
I think it's a really good question. I've also thought about it. I mean, is he saying that this is a purpose of life, a way to fulfill your life? Or are you saying this is something that's not total futility? At least here is something that's somewhat not pursuit of wind. It's, if you got to live in this world, you might as well live in this world with another person and enjoy it, kind of thing. Or is he saying this is the purpose of life? This is where you find fulfillment. Where is he placing this? In terms of his overall argument about where we find where we find fulfillment, where we find joy. It's very clear where we don't. That he's been very clear about where we don't find fulfillment, where we don't find joy, where what is futility. He seems to be a little bit less quite as strong about what is worthwhile. But he does say, if you got to live in this world, which we all do, and you gotta go through the things of life and the seasons, as we all do, you're going to have to try and labor in your life, because very few are those who can't labor. You might as well do it with this companionship, and because in the end, it's better. You're going to have to go through it. So better to be in your, be warm in your bed in every sense, right? Physical, spiritual, emotional with another person than being a philosopher all alone in your tower. At least in the middle of the night. Maybe during the day, he would rather be all alone in his tower. I don't know.
Well, if you're going to be here in passing time, and you're forced to be here passing time, you want to be passing time in a way that's not causing you infinite pain and suffering. So this is this is good as far as he's concerned.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just very practical,
Very practical.
but it doesn't give any, it doesn't speak to meaning at all.
It's not meaning. It's very, like you said, it's very concrete, very pragmatic. It's Lot Tov Adam Yot Levado, right? It's Adam and Eve. Here's, why is there Adam and Eve? Because it's not good for a human being to be alone, right? That's what it says in the book of Genesis. So, and we find this reflected in Judaism very strongly, this very pragmatic kind of, just how to live in life in this world and be as well as the lofty side of our tradition, but there's also a very pragmatic, very just concrete. This is what you got to do to have a good life. This is the side of Kohelet that resonates with the Fiddler on the Roof. Was the song about now it's escaping my mind. Sunset, sunrise, sunset, right? Sunrise, sunset, the seasons pass, the
Seedlings overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we did.
exactly. The power of relationships to bring meaning to our lives and of the people we love, and the movement of seasons, but the seasons may change and move, and we may not be able to stop the seasons, and they pass quicker than we'd like to. The seedlings blossom faster, and life moves on, and we become old, and the world is changing, and it's suddenly different than we thought it was. But one of the ways we find meaning through all of it is by holding on to the people who bring warmth to our life, right? That's a very powerful wisdom about life. And he continues, right? Go ahead. Someone was about to say something.
Oh, thank you. I think when you use the word pragmatic, which is also a word Alter uses, I think that's right, and I think there's a temptation to want to, that we all have, to either idealize or sentimentalize. Not that you were doing that, but there's a pull toward that, and to find some more meaning, some real companionship or some love, when there's a side of this text which is really coldly pragmatic. And we don't have to celebrate that, but I think we have to kind of recognize it, because you have these statements that are very much like in the book of Proverbs. And I saw in the note in Sepharia back in a few verses back, it links right to, I think it was verse 5. Yeah, the fool hugs his hands or folds his hands together, eats his own flesh, consumes what he has, just causes himself great harm. There's nothing surprising about that. It's very much in a certain tradition. But then he goes on, and you always have to be wary of be sensitive to when he's going to subvert the conventional wisdom. There's always that pull toward that. But it's really very pragmatic, and
he's not singing sunrise, sunset.
No, I think that's right. He's not doing that. I mean, in a different set of arrangements, he might be more like the man in Kiss Me Kate, Cole Porter. The marriage game is easy to play. Marriage game is quite all right. During the day, it's easy to play, but oh, what a bore at night is a different pragmatism. So since we're quoting Sid musicals, I
Sure. Appropriate. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. It's true. He doesn't appear sentimental at all, and he doesn't really bring in the personal of his own. He is speaking from the same place as he has before, but he's acknowledging that pragmatically this is useful to have in your life. But it's also a different mode, right? It's the mode of wisdom literature, or a Jewish version of that, and so he's speaking in a certain voice and mode. And then he continues, also, if one attacks, this is even more pragmatic, right? If one attacks, two can stand up to him. A threefold cord is not readily broken. I'm reminded of that verse in I think it's Parshat Mishpatim, where the Torah says, if there's a dispute between men, the wives of one of them cannot come and kick the other one where she shouldn't. That's not okay. Kind of there, there's a sense of, but I think it's very true in the one feels with a spouse and potentially maybe with another person that we have that kind of relationship with, that we're a unit, we're a fortress against the world that helps protect us against, sometimes other people, maybe not always in a direct confrontation, but it gives you a sense of security to have another person who's got your back, and who's stopping you from being, swindled. And we can imagine a world with even less security and even more, when you live in a world of corruption, even more corruption and lawlessness, you need that protection. Slightly different take, but when I was 14 years old, my family moved to India for a bunch of months, and at a certain point, so we had our landlord was a man who was trying to protect us, and once some in India, corruption and I guess petty theft is very common, though serious crime is much less common. But a guy came to repair something, and he spoke in Bengali to the landlord and said, it's easy to repair, but why don't you tell her, i.e. my mom, that we have to change it, and you and me will split the difference, the cost of the thing. And he was not going to go forward with that, so he told my mom that, and they threw him out and got somebody else to do the work. But that kind of thing, when you have someone with you could trust and protect you, it makes life a lot more safe.
Where is he coming up with the threefold? The threefold is very interesting, because he's talking about two people, and somehow that become three. So how does the two-ness of two people become three? And he may be thinking of somehow when two people get together, some third thing emerges from it, or something like that, because he should have said a twofold cord rather than a threefold.
Right. Well, one is attacked, and two can fight against it.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's like I was saying, the landlord who's the third, who's helping you against a third person is even better, and the virtues in sharing the effort. So in the Targum, the translation into Aramaic understands that to mean if you have a third person who's doing merit for you, if you're two people in a relationship and you sink into sin, a third can help raise you up, so you don't all end up in trouble. But the way Rashi says, it may refer to if you're attacked by robbers. It's nice to have a third person. But it may refer if you have a child and a grandchild who are all scholars. So if you have three generations of scholars in your, how great is that? But yeah, even more pragmatic, right? Three is better than two. Then you're really in good stead. Okay, let's go forward, because I'd like to finish a chapter. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer has the sense to heed warnings, but the former can emerge from a dungeon to become king, while the latter, even if born to kingship, can become a pauper. And let's put in the last, this third bit too. However, I reflect about all the living who walk under the sun with a useful successor who steps into his place. So a little bit of a shift. We're not talking about companionship anymore. Here we seem to be talking, in my mind, about how quickly life can move and about legacy, but there's some difficulty in all of this. What do you think? I mean, the person who's a king, you can become a king from being a pauper. It makes one think of Joseph straight away.
Right, yeah.
Right, because Joseph is the one who's sitting in jail and then he becomes king, while a king can easily be deposed and become a pauper. So the kind of uncertainty of life. What do you think that first sentence means? Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king.
Wisdom over riches?
Yeah, maybe it's just another case of wisdom over riches and the possibility of life. If you're wise, you can do anything, but if you're foolish, you have a king has everything to lose, right? Maybe that seems to be part of this, right? You have everything to lose. The youth who's a pauper has nothing to lose and can rise to the very top.
Well, you can certainly apply that sentence to everything that goes on in the world. An old, foolish king, like let's say a leader who doesn't pay attention to what people are trying to tell him to do, maybe because of age, not only just because he might be foolish. I mean, I think that those four sentences reflect upon everything that happens in life also. And you can come from the lowest place in life to become a very important person, or if you get so enamored with yourself, you can become nothing. So
Yeah.
I think those sentences are both very, very important for today, for heating.
You can start with everything and lose it all very easily.
Right, very easily. You can make all the fancy cars in the world,
But then suddenly it's all gone, and even if you still have them, you don't have wisdom, you don't have relationship, you don't have fulfillment. Everybody's just your friend because of your money, and it's just yeah.
And the foolish part can just be getting to the point where you're so enamored with yourself and your position that you don't listen to anybody else who's trying to help you or warn you.
Yeah, very much so. And then we have this verse, however, I reflected about all the living who walk under the sun with that useful successor who steps into his place. There's continuity because there's your successor. Unnumbered are the multitudes of all those who preceded them, and later generations will not acclaim him either, for that too is futile in pursuit of wind. So it's talking even in some way, the process of succession, of grooming somebody to be someone who will follow you, whether it's family member or maybe not a family member. It goes on forever. But you might, is it saying you may not get the recognition that's due to you for having passed it on, that too is futile?
Well, and like the line, who walk under the sun, doesn't literally mean you're walking under the sun, right? It means that good things, who have done good things, or who have had good things happen to them. And
yeah, and it may mean that you may be a very, very good king, right? But because of somehow the way you're perceived, nobody wants to acclaim you. You may have done things that were difficult but necessary, but people don't like you. And there might come another ruler who suddenly everybody loves for whatever reason, and they're not the one making the important but difficult decisions. And all those things can happen too.
As I read that, it brings me back to something that Raya often says. Raya's my wife, for those of you who don't know. And you work for a company, you devote your energies, you think you're making a great contribution, you could be doing this for years, but one day you leave, and you may leave on your own volition, you may leave because the company or your boss says they no longer need you. But what tends to happen is that day you're forgotten.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you did, what you said,
What you
your
did.
contribution was. It's the next person in line. And, this kind of says that to me quite clearly.
Here's your gold watch. See you later.
Right, get out. Yeah.
Mhm. There are exceptions to that, but it's so often not the case. As I say often, my father-in-law, who is a doctor of some repute in Washington, he says, now everybody knows me, but 5 years down the line, nobody will know me, and my grandmother, who was a politician and a psychiatrist in her town in Canada, and very well known. But by the time she was elderly, she was in the hospital, and this hospital where she practiced for so long but she was then 90 something, and nobody knew who she was. Nobody cared, and she was a nobody. She was nothing, and
That's with Howard. When we walk into Gottlieb Hospital, he practiced there for more than 50 years.
Wow.
They don't know who he is anymore.
50 years. No, they don't know who he is. A few people who are still there, people who are now the old timers there might remember, but they're right.
They're mostly all gone.
All gone.
Since Loyola took over.
Yeah.
His whole department is gone.
With the mezuzahs, right?
Yeah, and like when Howard fell a couple of years ago, right after Loyola took over, he was in the emergency room. He had a dislocated shoulder. And one of the guys who was still working from anesthesia came down and the cross fell off the wall. It was the funniest thing. Because they had put crosses all over now at Gottlieb.
Yeah.
Change of regime, a change of icon.
Right, that's right.
Seasons, right? Seasons come and go. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the same treatment for retirees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That doesn't change.
Right.
No.
And they don't even give gold watches anymore, Rabbi.
That's true. More gold watches. Yeah. Yeah. Then we have this last verse: be not overeager to go to the house of God. More acceptable is obedience than the offering of fools, for they know nothing but to do wrong. I actually like this verse after thinking about it for a while, because I think, it's saying the message of the prophets on some level, which is, it's better, giving an offering from the wrong place is not worth very much. Better, instead of going to synagogue or making a big show of your religiosity, I'm thinking of in the Orthodox world where, in the Kaddish, there's a big thing of who will say Yehei Shmei Rabbah the loudest, so they, literally people will scream it, Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach L'olam. We don't do it, but people will scream it, and it's like, that's just a show of religiosity. Does it really showing anything about your religious life, like what's inside your heart? What's the real, so it's not about giving a big important offering in the temple. It's about doing what's right within your heart.
It sounds like Deuteronomy. There's several times where that comes out in Jewish thought.
Yeah, and Deuteronomy,
passages we read on Yom Kippur.
In the prophets, and in Isaiah, What use have I of your offerings on the full moon and of your, it's God wants our offerings, but if they're brought half-hearted and the widow and the orphan are being mistreated, then God is not most pleased. So it actually, in some ways, ends the chapter in a powerful place in my mind, because it's talking about, what's in your heart in the end is what's important. And the show is not as much. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
I will just change a little bit and say, instead of saying be not over eager to go to the house of God, you can still be eager to come to the synagogue if you like, at least to the virtual events. I think.
Can we on Saturday, or is it still gonna be virtual?
We're leaning to virtual at the moment.
Okay.
but not 100%
Okay, I think that's wise.
It's, numbers are still going up and even more people are getting it. So why take the risk?
That's-
Yeah, I really prefer to be in person, but it doesn't seem like the time.
I know,
Yeah.
I agree, Judy. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just,
Better to be safe than sorry, as my mother would say.
exactly. You want people coming to synagogue and suddenly people getting it. It's so contagious, and boosted or not, masked or not, people seem to be getting it. So
Right.
let's be careful. Nice to see everybody.
Have a
Yeah.
nice.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.